Hi, this is Jeff Cohn from SI Restoration. Today's video is today's video is on how to clean up a flooded basement. Now, before I continue about it, I want to give you a background information so that you understand that I'm not just didn't read this stuff last night and decided to create a professional video, but I actually have 35 years handling flooded basements in Baltimore, Maryland, and Washington, DC, and Central Maryland. So besides just being able to say, boy, great, Jeff, you have 35 years of sucking water out of a basement. On top of that, I'm IICRC certified as well as SI Restoration is as IICRC certified. What is IICRC? It's the Institute of Inspection for Cleaning and Restoration Companies, and it was developed about 45 years ago because what would happen is that you'd have different companies trying to clean up, extract the water from a flooded basement, dry it out, and put it back together. Now, there were different methods. And so the question is, especially for the insurance companies, is how do we know that you did a good job? And of course, as a homeowner, or you may own a building or property, is how do we know we're getting the job done right? Well, you can be reassured that the IICRC has guidelines called the S500, which includes water and sewage backups and unsanitary situations. It's important because this is a 260-page manual that the guidelines are actually used for in legal courts battles, in a lot of bids for states and federal government when it comes to water damage restoration, as we call it, or water damage cleanup, or cleanup after a flooded basement. So this particular guidelines is a very, very detailed of what to do and how to be trained to do it. So furthermore, let me go ahead and let's start off with an example. Let's assume that you may have, so we'll assume it and you may have it, a flooded basement, and let's say that it came from outside water. Now outside water, I'm talking about rain. It could be a hurricane, could be a storm, and you go downstairs and you'll notice that you now have an inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, sometimes just saturated carpet. Now, there's a difference between water coming from outside, and which would include again rain, hurricane, storms, anything from water, and water that has actually flooded your basement because of a toilet overflow, a busted pipe, a water heater bust. The outside water, remember, is going through all types of dirt, what I would call, disgusting materials. You could be living next to a farm with animals. You can take it from there. And when it gets into your house, it's not clean. It also contains bacterias, viruses, and mold, spores, and mold. So you have to remember this is not a clean source. So the IICRC considers it an unclean, unsanitary source, similar to a sewage backup. Now, with that, you may also, your next door neighbor, because there was heavy rains and because you had a storm, the water actually could fill up the sewer systems and all the type of drainage and could get a backup because the water has to go somewhere if it can't go through through the county or municipality system. So all of a sudden, all your sewage backs up. So both you and your neighbor have a flooded basements, but two different sources, but are treated the same way. So let's review those, and then we'll go over what if it's just clean water. So I always recommend or almost require that safety is number one. So whatever happens, whatever you do, you must think of safety of yourself and for the occupants of the home. So when you go down to this particular area, remember that you don't know what has come into your home. So you must wear puncture-resistant boots, rubber boots that go to your knees, and wear puncture-resistant gloves that go to the elbow. So it covers the whole arm and to the elbow. And what happens is that you also want to wear at least a half face mask, N95, if you guys remember during the COVID periods, and or even a full face mask. That depends on the severity. And I'm not a doctor and I'm not a medical professional. So, and I'm on a head of a municipality, so I can't tell you exactly what you should wear because I don't know what situation you're in. So, when in doubt, ask. Okay. And you can usually ask your janitorial supply house. A lot of times they're very knowledgeable of what they are. Home Depot is a great source. You can buy it there. I don't know how much knowledge they have on different ones when you're getting into different situations. Or you can look it up online, which is, I just thought of that. You can look it up online. So what at this point you have at least covered your feet, your hands, and your face. Should you wear a Tyvek suit, which is a plastic suit that you see sometimes you see when they're laboratories, people will have it over their head and all over the body. And you can buy those in Home Depot. Maybe other department stores, but definitely Home Depot. I'm gonna call. So you are now protected and you go down. And remember, you're gonna want to extract the water. So if you decide to do this yourself, you definitely do not want to use the same extractors or vacuum or not vacuum, excuse me, a particular unit that extracts water, okay, shop vac, whatever you want to call it, if it's going to be used again in other situations, because you could be spreading in the future situation or doing anything because you don't know if you completely cleaned and disinfected this particular equipment after you're done, spreading future germs and future issues. So my suggestion is to run out to Home Depot or to Janitorial Supply House or Ace Hardware, wherever you can, who sells these, and get one of those particular extraction units. Now, as you're extracting, be warned that those extractors will fill up pretty darn fast, number one, excuse me. And so you will spend a lot of time extracting and then dumping the water. Now, dumping the water or dumping the sewage or dumping whatever is in your basement. You can't take it outside if you have access to the basement and from your flooded water and dump it outside. You can't because you don't know where that source had come from originally. So the only way to correctly to dump it is to put it down where it came from the if it pumped out from the toilet, from a slop sink downstairs in your basement, whatever. Now, if it's clogged, you're going to have to get a plumber out there and get them to unplug it at the same time, unclog it the same time that you are having you decide you're having the work you're extracting done. So as they unclog it, you can go ahead and put all that water, dirty water, sewage down in from the flooded basement. Now, you've extracted everything, and your flooded basement now is wet, but there's no standing water or standing sewage. Now, you now look around and you notice that there is furniture. Right. And of course, you knew there were furniture there because you have a fully developed basement and you're going to use it for as a club room or a family room. And now you're saying, gee, what do I do with this? Do I throw it away? Do I keep it? And the answer is it hydroscopic? And I want to remind you, by the way, as I'm explaining this all comes from the IICRC S500 guidelines. Now, if the material or the furniture or whatever the product is absorbent and it can absorb in any way, it needs to be thrown away. There is no way to guarantee its safety. Now, I can't tell you after that what you decide to do with it. That's the correct way to keep a healthy environment. I'm going to get into insurance related in a second. I mean, not in a second, in a little bit later on this. But basically, anything that's absorbent, throw it away. That includes your carpet. That includes your padding. That includes the vinyl plank floor that's on your floor. All that's got to be removed and thrown away. Now, you may say, well, hold it, Jeff. The vinyl plank is not absorbent. And it didn't absorb anything. Well, the problem is, you're right. You're absolutely correct that it's not absorbent. What is absorbent is your padding underneath. There's actually a thin layer of padding. And the fact that even if there wasn't padding under there, the water will get underneath that, and you cannot dry it out, and you will cause mold and other issues. So unfortunately, that plank's got to come up. And also the walls. Now, the walls are absorbent. And again, I have plenty of people who say, Jeff, don't worry. The carpet got affected. So the furniture got affected, but the walls are fine, which I have to be very gentle and political and be as nice about it as I can when I have to disagree. Now, the reason why is because if the water had transferred from one room to another, or if you notice that the floor is wet adjacent to the bottom of the floor, I can pretty much tell you it's wet inside. Now, you may say, gee, Jeff, I'm looking at the wall right now and it looks dry. Well, that's the paint. You see, the 2 or 3 coats of paint that you have on the wall are actually hiding the moisture. So it's behind and inside the wall that you have. And so what happens is that as you notice, you'll see the outside, it's all nice and paint, no problem, no rippling, but inside is wet. Now, unfortunately, because it comes from an outside source, and we don't know what that water it carried in, it's got to be cut out completely. So you have to cut out all the wet areas that you see. Now, in the IICRC S500 guidelines, it also says to cut out an additional 2 feet around that area that you cut out. And that's because sometimes the water will absorb inside the drywall or in areas you don't see, and you'll miss it. So by doing 2 feet above whatever you can see, you're really making sure that you've got all that wet stuff out. Once you've done all that and the carpet's out and the vinyl tiles out, and now you don't really have a flooded basement anymore for it, but you have a sort of moisture laden concrete, and there's moisture around the studs and things like that. Permanent items, they're in there, pillars, whatever you have. You want to go in, and it is recommended to take a power washer and power wash the areas, and that's to get everything out of the crevices and corners and etc. And to try to get out as much gunk as possible, because that gunk carries issues. Now, one thing I did skip was the fact that when you do take those materials, you do want to put them in a bag and seal those bags up, and then take those bags outside. You certainly don't want to leave them in the house, and you want to make sure they're in plastic bags. Now, what happens is after you have gone in and power washed everything out and it's clean, then you want to go ahead and put in a disinfectant. Now, what happens is that most people will say, all right, well, I'll just go to the store and buy Lysol, or I'll buy this. To be able to be certain, you have to find a chemical disinfectant that is a hospital grade. Now, with a hospital grade disinfectant, and again, look at the labels, look it up online before you go to Home Depot. I'm not sure what they sell. A lot of times, janitorial supply houses, cleaning supplies for commercial janitorial companies will sell that, because they do sell to hospitals. And that's the products you need. And that's what you do, is you actually flood the floor. Believe it or not, you flood the floor again. And what happens is that gets into all the crevices that are clean now, and also underneath the studs and any of the areas that you didn't cut out because they weren't what we call hygroscopic materials. So what happens at that point is you're going to let it sit for probably 15 or 20 minutes. And then after that, you want to extract it out again, and then do another application just to make sure. Again, it's part of the IICRCS 500 guidelines. At that point, your job is not over, unfortunately, because you now have a lot of moisture. It's clean, but it's clean moisture, but it's moisture inside the room and underneath the studs and in crevices. If you don't dry it out correctly, you're going to get mold. So you need to bring in a significant amount of air movers and dehumidifiers. Again, the IICRCS 500 guidelines actually tells you per square foot and per linear foot and per cubic foot for the piece of all the equipment you need, and you need to let it run for about 3 days. Now, unfortunately, you don't have what's called grains per pound of moisture meters or GPP meters, so you're going to have to do the best you can. You can call a restoration company after that if they have time to come out and do that and test it for you. But you want to make sure that it's completely dried out. Okay. Now, once it's dried out, and then you can go ahead and put everything back, the drywall, the flooring, the carpet. Now, people ask me questions when you have a flooded basement and they say, gee, Jeff, what you just said is wonderful, but I'm not doing that. So number one, we need to find a company that can do it. And we want to make sure we find the right company who actually knows what they're doing. And are there ways of uh, someone else paying for it? And I know that sounds kind of odd, but yes, there is. So let's stick with the number one is how do we find the correct company? Well, there are plenty of companies that can claim on the internet that on websites that they've done this for a long time, such as SI Restoration in the Baltimore, Maryland, Washington, DC area. And that's great. You know, everyone can toot the horns. But what I normally say is if you're outside the Baltimore, Washington, Maryland area, and you're looking for somebody, there you go to www.iicrc.org. That is the website of the IICRC, and you will find a list of companies in your area who are certified for flooded basements, restoration, flooded basements cleanup, water damage cleanup. And those companies can handle just like us because they're going or should follow the IICRC S500 guidelines. Now, the question now is how do I do this without having to pay anything? So your homeowner's insurance normally doesn't cover flooded basements. Now, I want to make sure I use the right terminology because people say flooded basement, and what they mean is water damage. That's fine. Let's go over that real quickly. By the way, I'm not an insurance professional. I'm not a medical doctor or a medical professional, and I'm not an attorney or it's anything to do with being with legal. So when I say things, take it as a layperson saying this and double check it with those particular professional sources. Okay. So what happens is normally at my 35 years of experience, what I have noticed, okay, and I will say that noticed because everybody's policy is different. Every insurance policy is different, and some may be the same, may be different. Every insurance company has a little bit twist. So read your policy or make sure your agent explains your policy. In it, usually the term flood, it means water coming from outside. That's water coming from a rain or a hurricane. That's water coming into your home. And it's normally, I've been told by insurance adjusters, it's not covered because technically it is a maintenance issue for the reason why it came in. So if it comes in through your window, that's something when they say maintenance, it means maintenance. That means it's something you should have been able to take care of prior to this. That you could have prevented it. Whether you agree with that or not is completely a different conversation. The point that this is their discussion. It could come from a foundation, the concrete, and you could have cracks in your concrete. It could come from a normal sources, as long as if they consider it a maintenance issue, it's not covered. Now that doesn't mean you don't call your insurance company and ask them. You can probably ask them, say, look, I don't want to put a claim in, but based upon your experiences, is this normally a covered loss? Cover, that's what the term, and they call it a loss because to them, the insurance company is a loss of money, so they call it a loss. And so you want to make sure you kind of want to ask them if they'll give you that information before you put a claim in. And so the problem is that again, is that it has to be something that your flooded basement has to be caused by something that they will cover. Normally, okay, on average, a flooded basement will be covered because something internal in the house has caused it. So a plumbing issue, a water heater issue, a sewage backup. Okay, even though it's coming from technically outside, the water went in through your pipes. There was a clog, and then it backed itself out up into your house. So that's not a maintenance issue because you couldn't control that. So what happens is that you have those types of issues. Could be an air conditioning unit could leak. Anything to do with plumbing and sewer backups, and be careful with sewer backups to find out if you have coverage. I've seen a lot of people who are now going after the insurance companies who will say, just pay for what you need. In my opinion, I don't know how many homeowners really know what they need exactly. So that's the problem. So you may find out that you're not covered for something because you went out for that less expensive policy. So what happens is in many cases, sewer backups are covered, and anything to do with the pipes, anything to do with the toilet, anything to do with anything that's similar is going to usually be covered. Again, verify that with your insurance adjuster. When that happens is that the restoration company or as I mentioned, the company is certified through the IICRC, the insurance companies will pay their bills. Now, I'm going to do another video on the whole idea of pricing and how the insurance company and what I would call water damage restoration companies who do this on a daily basis are not they don't have any trouble meeting and having any issues of getting the work paid for. Okay. So thank you very much. This is Jeff Cohn talking about flooded basements, especially in the Baltimore, Maryland, Washington, D.C. area. If you have any questions, go to www.si-restoration.com. You can also call me if you're in the area at area code 410-458-5371. Happy to talk to you and help you in any way that I can. If you're outside the area, please go to the www.iicrc.org. Thank you. I appreciate it.